In the realm of waterproof jackets, Goretex, well, is a household name, but it's the use of this magical membrane in cycling clothing is how Gore Wear have used the stuff to make really genuinely waterproof and breathable materials. So we've teamed up with Gore to make this video, and they've invited me out here to their headquarters in Germany to find out just what makes it so specialist and exactly what goes into developing some of the most technical mountain bike clothing on the planet. Taking its name from founder Wilbert Gore, Goretex actually started life when he was working for DuPont in the 50s, and he's working with what we know as PTFE, or polytetrafluoroethylene. And he actually discovered it had some very good properties, but it was something that DuPont didn't want to consider pursuing. And it was his son, Bob, actually, that discovered that by expanding this rapidly, it would actually have some very unique properties. And you know what? He was right. ePTFE was actually later released to the public under the trademark name Goretex, although its manufacture is still a closely guarded secret. There are 9 billion microscopic pores per square inch of material, each of which is 20,000 times smaller than a single droplet of water, which means water simply cannot pass through that material. But here's the really interesting thing. Each of those pores is also 700 times larger than heat vapor molecules, which is basically has to pass through in order to keep you cool. But what is it that makes it so good when using it in a technical fabric like this waterproof jacket from Gore Wear? Well, if we go back to the beginning a minute and just think about a standard waterproof jacket, not one of these ones here, you think they'll typically have some sort of two-piece construction. They have an inner PU layer, polyurethane, and that'll be laminated to some kind of outer skin. It could be something quite thick, or it could be a nice thin shell that will be having some kind of water treatment on there, so a water repellency treatment. So it may well keep the water off your back, but you're going to boil on the bag on the inside. That's where the use of a membrane like Goretex in Gore clothing actually makes all the difference, because of the fact that it keeps that water at bay, but it also keeps you comfortable by allowing that heat moisture vapor to escape. So you're ultimately comfortable all of the time. So really, that is the best way to go about it. Now, although Gore Wear use Goretex membrane in their materials, it's actually important to say that actually they make a lot of other technical cycling clothing. That's just part of it. Being at the forefront of mountain bike technical clothing though, Gore Wear are now offering one of their new products in both a fully waterproof option and also a hybrid option, as you can see Ludovic wearing here. So what I want to know is why you would pick a hybrid jacket over something like this, a full waterproof option.
80% of the time when I go outside just for riding single track, the weather is like today, so sometimes there is rain, sometimes there is wind, sometimes there is cold, but it's not always rainy. So which means that with the Goretex Infinium, we have the chance to have a very good jacket which stays soft compared to a hard shell jacket, which is sometimes a little bit noisy, but very protective. And with the new Goretex Infinium jacket, we have the chance to have the protective part where we need to have the protective part, and soft part when we need to have the soft part. And the soft part allow you, for instance, to put a back protective, for instance, keep the jacket stretch, and you can still move on your bike and really keep this softness. So that's the reason why the mix between the Goretex and the soft shell under the names Goretex Infinium, for me, it's one of the future for the rider.
The concept of what this is about is actually really quite cool. It's a bit of a capsule wardrobe, something that's really important for mountain bikers, in fact. But more to it, let's find out exactly how this hybrid technology actually works. Once the concept of the garment is briefed, it's time for those features to be designed. I got chatting to product developer of the Infinium Jacket, Anita.
The hard shell Goretex fabric is it's a woven fabric, and that means it's more water resistant or more waterproofed, but it has not the stretchability, because it's really difficult to have a stretchable, completely Goretex waterproofed fabric.
Yeah.
And the soft shell Gore-Tex Infinium fabric as a knit, and it's itself with some elastic yarns also stretchable. So the advantage is in the whole body of the fit, you can make a cut or pattern of the jacket very slim.
So more like almost a much more performance fit, I guess.
Performance fit, more like a jersey maybe also. And you still have the freedom of movement. Yeah, there's no restriction. If you would make the same jacket only with the Goretex fabric, it would be very uncomfortable because you cannot move. And
of course, yeah.
Yeah.
I see that so you mentioned the zip's not a waterproof zip, but it's obviously waterproof underneath. What's the reason for not having a waterproof zip on here?
The reason is that all waterproof zippers, because of the treatment, because it's actually a normal zipper and has a special treatment on top to make the zipper waterproof. And this treatment makes the zipper very, very stiff. But we wanted to have in this concept still a really lightweight and packable jacket.
Yeah, I understand.
And if you have a waterproof zipper, you always need two hands
to hold the fabric tight.
Exactly.
Yeah, okay.
And so with a normal zipper, it's easy to use. And with the underlayer, with a completely waterproof fabric and taping, it's also waterproof.
So can you explain to us some of the limitations and issues you might have when you're designing products that really function over form?
Yeah, so the most important thing is the fabric, of course, for every product, and there you have most of the limitations. So for mountain biking, it's really important to have a good balance between abrasion resistance, so when you have your backpack on, that your jacket doesn't fall apart after 2 or 3 wears. And then, of course, you don't want to be covered in sweat after 20 minutes. So this is a thing that we always have to look at when we choose fabrics. Also considering the weight of the garment, because you want to have the jacket with you probably and don't want to have it too heavy. So this is a very difficult combination to achieve, and I think in our jackets, in the C5 trail jackets, we really managed to do it very well.
And what's your ethos when you're choosing fabrics as such? So obviously you can see a whole bank of different samples and inspiration everywhere. How do you get to that?
It's quite a variety, so it comes from different aspects of life and of different areas. So I look into workwear a lot. I also look into fashion, of course, because that gives you a lot of inspiration in terms of colors, textures, fabrics as well, and also the direction of style that there is on the market. And of course, for mountain bike, I think sometimes it's more interesting to look in fashion, because this is a more style-driven area of the market than other areas in sports, I think. When we choose colors, we always have to be aware that certain fabrics are not taking every kind of color. So for example, if you want to dye a very bright shade, you have to be aware that polyamide is not workable for that. But it's really interesting that color itself has a history on its own. So the reason why dark blue, for example, was chosen for the Marines was that the natural blue color was the most durable for that end use, because you know it's exposed to sun, like when you're on the sea,
sure,
you're exposed to sun and salt water, and the blue dye stuff, the natural blue dye stuff, was the most durable of all colors. So that's why marine blue is marine blue now.
So it has great outdoor potential.
We mock up the first prototypes normally, get it out for the consumers to test it, or to our athletes or to whomever. Or sometimes we test it ourselves just to get a first feel. And then directly you know it's going to do the job or not. But then step by step you see on the prototypes, are you coming closer to the finished garment and fulfilling the desired outcome or not. And this all happens outside of a standard, and then suddenly, of course, when we decide, hey, now this is a garment we see that can make it into a commercial line, then we say, yep, now we go the standard process. I mean, there are criteria. Like in Gore, we have a principle that's called fitness for use. Yeah. So we guarantee that the garment does the job that we want it to do. And if this is not the case, we take it out of the line, or we just take it back out of development and further work on it until it really reflects this.
After an initial period of field testing, refinements are made to the next round of prototypes, and this continues until the product is perfect. I checked in with Maria about her role in this final stage of development.
So basically the way I approach it is I come to the fitting room, I put it on the model, I try to recap the handover notes, and then to check point by point so I don't lose track of anything, which is quite easy actually among the process. And then once I have it all, and that means regarding trims, finishing, and then down to the fit, probably one of the biggest chunks of the whole process. I've had measured the sample before, and then after pinning, like in this case, I will remeasure it again. So then I can note down to see what's the difference between the measurement that I have in the system and that what will become afterwards. Then I always have to be super careful to understand if the proportion is still there, if I'm not changing the shape that usually would have for men's and then for a very specific style for such a sport like road cycling. And then in order to tell to the factory into a very easy way, of course, very clear pictures, and that I'm very obsessed with, very high quality in all perspectives. I always do front, both sides and back.
Is that when the garment's like on the subject?
Yes, on the model.
Yeah.
And once I have to address like a particular point, like in terms of length, I will shoot with the model on the bike. If not needed, always standing. So
yeah, so you can see it for relevance.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, okay.
And then also because you want to see wrinkles possibly once you're standing, when you're off the bike, or when you're biking. You know, it needs to be looking very sharp in any situation. You and the technicians at the factory will speak the same language, and that's the easiest way to get there in a very efficient way, I would say.
Yeah, that seems like an incredible part of the process, and really interesting to hear how it doesn't get lost in translation when you're doing things like this to very specific panels on the clothing. And I think it's amazing, and there's certainly a lot more tech that goes into Gore Wear than I realised. Now, I've used Gore cycling clothing for years. Knew it was tech, but I didn't realise just how much tech went into it. Impressive stuff. Now, you've seen how much goes into developing a product. Wait till you see the testing side of things. As you might imagine, a company like Gore Wear takes its testing very, very seriously. There's testing facilities here for just about every eventuality when it comes to fabrics, just like this one right here. That kind of reminds me a bit of an espresso machine, actually. It takes a portion of fabric, locks it down, and forces water against it to simulate what it would be like in the environment, perhaps kneeling down or something. Water cannot get through that fabric. And again, with other machines like this crumple tester here, it tests the lamination of the fabrics. You have inner and outer layers, and it tests it for durability and what simulates what it would be like in a real life environment. Again, after processes like this, everything is waterproof tested again. It's tested in things, in fact, like this big drum old washing machine, particularly brutal, 500 hours worth in there. Air permeability test, environmental testing, and even abrasion testing. You're starting to get a picture here that Gore take things very seriously when it comes to product manufacturing and testing. So in addition to all the other fabric testing goes on, I've actually got this proper, a rain chamber, I guess you could call it that. Just to say, this is actually the waterproof jacket. This is not the hybrid jacket that I'm standing in here. And I probably wouldn't want to stand in here wearing that, because apparently I have to be in here for half an hour. That's the standard protocol for testing in a situation like that. And that equals 8 hours of consistent rain, basically just a torrent of abuse. And that is to test the overall product when it's finished, and to test all of the features of it. The zips, there's sprays on the wall aiming at me as well. Generally, it's not a very nice place to be. It reminds me a bit of home, if I'm honest. So this is known as the storm cube. In here you can see, just watching the water beading on top of the surfaces of the fabrics here. It's pretty cool. Actually, what they use this for is testing for wind chill factor. Now this is something you have to have either a waterproof jacket or some sort of windstopper jacket, like that brand new hybrid jacket we were just checking out. Now, as you have a heat camera in here, they can detect what your body temperature is doing in correlation to that. It's pretty good. The place is getting pretty cold now, and we're going to get out of it. Well, as you can see, Gore Wear take things very seriously when it comes to product development and testing, both here in the laboratories in Germany and also out in the field where they have their prototypes tested thoroughly at every possible stage of development. I think that's a key part in what makes them products like this fully waterproof and breathable jacket featuring that famous Gore-Tex membrane, and it's why they can also guarantee it to keep you dry. But I have to say, the things that have really stood out to me, the attention to detail that they have on all of their technical fabrics. The small things like having elasticated cuffs at the sides of the waist opposed to having them all the way around so the fabrics don't bunch up. And things like this Infinium Jacket, which at a glance it could be lost in translation, but it makes common sense. It's perfect sense for mountain bikers to have waterproof uppers, waterproof shoulders and arms, and maintain that windproof body, but in a much lighter, more comfortable, stretchy fabric. They're definitely pioneering different styles of fabric when it comes to optimum stuff for getting out and getting dirty out in the environment. If you've got any questions about Gore, anything you want to comment on this video, let us know in the comments underneath this video. And for another Gore Wear related video, click down here to see myself, Blake and Neil getting wet and wild out in the hills around Bath. And as always, don't forget to leave us some comments in the comments section underneath. Give us a big like if you like technical mountain bike clothing that helps you enjoy your bike out in the elements. Hit the subscribe button and don't forget to also click the notification bell, which means on your device that has Gore-Tex membranes inside it, protecting the microphone in there, you'll get a little notification every time we upload a new video. Cheers guys.